to proceed with our meeting. Before we do so, Andy has a few words that he wants to read on behalf of someone.
So, many of you have met Karen Meyer before. She and her husband produced these films, and she has provided an introduction for me to read for you all. The Ocean Frontiers 3, Leaders in Ocean Stewardship and the New Blue Economy, produced by Greenfire Productions. So that's her company. Greenfire has been documenting regional ocean planning across the country since 2012. This is the third film in the Ocean Frontiers series, and it focuses on the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic regional ocean plans. Regional ocean planning is underway along the West Coast, and this film provides a window into the issues the East Coast ocean plans address and the collaboration taking place among federal, tribal, and state governments, as well as ocean users in the private sector and coastal communities. Greenfire films are available to anyone who wants to share them at www.oceanfrontiers.org. And West Coast Regional Planning Body Annual Meeting is coming up in Long Beach on December 5th, 6th, and 7th. And Karen will be available to answer any questions that we may have for her online following the movie. So with that, I will go ahead and get it started.
Can I just say something real quick, Andy?
Sure.
So the reason why this is being shown is I was in Yachats at a screening of this film earlier this year. Walter, were you there? Walter was there. It was a longer version, and Walter and I both thought that the subject matter related a lot to some of the discussion that we were having with regional planning bodies. So we just thought it'd be kind of interesting to see what's happening on the East Coast, since that was their focus. And that was the reason why we asked Karen if she had a shortened version to allow us to present it today. So it was us contacting Karen and her providing us with the film.
Shipping the nation's cargo. They come by expanding forays into offshore energy and aquaculture. They come by the heightened urgency to restore and protect coastlines and ocean habitats, and from the mounting needs of our armed forces to defend them all.
We protect people on the sea. We protect the nation from threats given by the sea.
Can you hear in the back?
And we protect the sea itself from an environmental stewardship perspective.
From Maine to Virginia, seaward 200 miles. An unprecedented collaboration of federal and state agencies and Native American tribes are working with new ocean data and extensive stakeholder input to keep national security strong, the economy growing, and to protect vital ocean habitat. This is the new blue economy of the 21st century.
In 2013, there was 108 million metric tons of cargo that was imported into the mid-Atlantic states. There was also 107 million metric tons that was exported during 2013.
4 of the busiest ports in the nation are found along the mid-Atlantic coast, shipping and receiving more than 200 million metric tons of cargo. New York's harbor alone accounts for approximately $200 billion in trade each year.
And you can see right away that the prosperity of our nation is inextricably connected to maritime commerce and the safe flow of this commerce into these ports. Ocean planning fits very well with the Coast Guard's approach. It's critical for the Coast Guard and other agencies to work together in a collaborative manner to ensure the maritime transportation system is safe, secure, efficient, and resilient to continue to bring this large volume of cargo into our ports.
The Panama Canal has been expanded, the Suez Canal has been expanded, which very much affects ports around the country, and especially on the East Coast. The industry is moving very fast, and the ships will continue to get larger. I think that's the main takeaway, is that ports will have to accommodate larger vessels or they'll be left behind. the whole point of this regional planning body is for every entity at the table to work together to maintain, the healthy ocean ecosystem, sustainable ocean uses, because we found that going off and working in a vacuum just isn't going to get it done for these pressing challenges in the 21st century.
For the Port of Virginia alone, 374,000 jobs, which is about 10% of the Virginia resident workforce, are linked to the port activity. That accounts for $1.4 billion in state and local tax revenue. About 30 miles east of right where I'm standing here is the juncture of three very important aspects that contribute to ocean planning. There are commercial interests, there's national security interests, and there's also conservation interests. In addition to that, you also have the largest naval installation in the world. We have approximately 75 ships that are home ported here in Norfolk, Virginia. We have hundreds of military aircraft stationed here in Norfolk, Naval Air Station Oceana, and nearby Langley Air Force Base. And so this is the primary training ground for the Atlantic Fleet just off the mid-Atlantic waters. All this is in the same area where we have wind energy being pursued, hydrokinetic energy is being pursued. An expansion of the shipping lanes associated with the Panama Canal is happening. Now, just outside of the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay is also the North Atlantic right whale migratory area, as well as canyons that are the home of some deep water corals that were only recently discovered. The Navy has a critical role in national defense in protecting the ocean highway and the global economy. So what the ocean plans enable you to do is it provides an avenue, it provides a mechanism, and it provides a process by which stakeholders, whether they be commercial interests, national security interests, commercial fishermen, recreational fishermen, the conservation group, have the same information that's going into the decision-making process through the use of the Mid-Atlantic or the Northeast regional data portals. Data is the key for understanding the decisions that are being made regarding the ocean.
One of the biggest benefits that's already happened is the assimilation of so much data about the ocean that previously has been in many different locations and not very accessible. So the creation of our regional data portals, we have one in the Mid-Atlantic now, the Northeast has one, some other regions are working on theirs too. And it creates that one place where you can go and find information about every kind of human use and every kind of ocean resource. And it's also helped us identify where the data gaps are and help give us a pathway toward what kind of future research we need to do in order to better understand what's happening in the Mid-Atlantic.
That's really important as a fisherman. Once you become educated on what ocean planning means and what regional planning bodies are doing, you understand that it's a way to protect the areas that you fish. It's a way to protect the ecosystem. It's a way to protect sustainability. It's a way of continuing the tradition, and that's fishing. There's a common misconception that this whole ocean policy is more of a Democrat, more of an Obama administration thing, but it was the Bush administration that put together this Commission on Oceans to deal with fishing interests, to deal with shipping interests, to deal with wind power, oil and gas exploration. We were getting to a boiling point where all these different ocean uses come to a head, and we're going to have some real access issues. So that became very clear with this commission, and they recommended very clearly that we needed some sort of coordinated ocean policy to deal with that sort of thing. We're the canaries in the coal mine. We're the first people that start to see it decline, and we're also the first people that start to see the recovery. So, with that said, this is public resource we're talking about. The oceans are public, and all stakeholders, all interests need to have input into that process. We need to be heard, and we really need to engage. And ocean planning is really providing us that opportunity to be part of it.
Goals that we've accomplished through the tribal aspect are right in line with what the states and federal government want to do as well. What makes it successful to date is the people that come to the table have the utmost respect for each other. And that's the bottom line.
We're having conversations about shipping. We're having conversations around fishing. One of the most important elements that we need to be incorporating into decision-making is conservation. How do we identify and protect areas to ensure that our oceans remain healthy? So we need to take that to the next level and integrate conservation into decision-making moving forward.
At the foundation of each ocean plan is the latest information on the many uses of the sea. Now, for the first time, gathered in one place and readily available to all. A one-stop shop known as the Regional Data Portals.
So when we started this project, our best maps of the ocean looked pretty much like this. Nice, blue, open ocean. Now we see it quite differently. So if we can click in this one given place, we can learn a lot about it. We can learn this is an important area along the beach here off Assateague Island for swimming and for surfing. That it's also important for fishing from small charter vessels, and also important for wildlife viewing. We set out to take data that had been sitting across the region in different offices and different silos, if you will, different state and federal agencies, and to bring it all together and try to make some sense of it. And in so doing, start to manage our ocean as though it was one connected place, instead of a bundle of separate uses and jurisdictions. So here's a bookmark that says for security, and we can see there's a lot going on here. We've got the world's largest Navy base here in the Mid-Atlantic, in Norfolk, and they have all of these different zones that are really important to them. These are good things to know about if you're planning to do something in the ocean, because our national security needs are paramount. So we have different kinds of warning areas, areas where there is unexploded ordnance on the seafloor, submarine lanes, and so on.
Data portals are providing for the first time a comprehensive view of the ocean's myriad users and inhabitants, and a powerful means of providing fairly for them all.
The first thing that the data portal does to support decision makers is give them all a common set of data to work with.
Marine scientist Emily Shumchini gathers biological data that populates the data portals, from hotspots of biodiversity to breeding areas of birds and migratory routes of whales.
So this map is showing the total abundance of endangered marine mammals in both the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic regions. And actually this map covers the entire Atlantic coast. So we're seeing red pixels where there's a high abundance of endangered marine mammals, and blue pixels are where there's a relatively low abundance or no abundance of endangered mammals.
What our Northeast Ocean Data Portal allows us to do is have thousands of data layers on marine life, for example, 150 different species of marine mammals and fish and birds that allow us to understand where those critters are in the ocean and how they're moving.
As federal lead for the Northeast Ocean Plan, Nicholson sees the data portals as indispensable for charting the ocean's future in an uncertain world of climatic change.
This is really the backbone of the information we need to understand how special and unique our ecosystem is. Because we know that climate is changing. We need to understand what is the distribution and abundance of those marine life and habitats out there that we are stewards and protecting, and how is that ecosystem function changing? How are those critters moving with changes in climate?
And we're basically compiling all of this information into over 5,000 different data layers on the portal to support decision making through the Northeast Ocean Plan. Very easy to understand, it's very visual, and it could go a long way to furthering ocean literacy.
The Northeast Plan covers from the coast all the way out to 200 miles offshore, from the Canadian border all the way through Long Island Sound. And as we worked with people to understand what was going on the water and in the water, we even extended that study area south so that we were working with our mid-Atlantic colleagues to understand the marine life, the habitat, all those ocean uses like shipping and fishing that don't stop at a certain boundary. The Northeast Plan has demonstrated over the past 5 years our ability to see beyond our mandates, across our boundaries, and really understand each other's values as we look holistically at the ecosystem that we're all trying to manage and care for. It's given us the ability to understand what's going on the water and in the water, and have that context to inform and guide the decisions that we make under existing authorities.
The sea is, of course, where we've always gone to fish. Our fishing culture and economies are as old as our nation. Never have our needs been greater, nor our fish and fishermen under more pressure.
We've had this ocean to ourselves for many years. The fears that the fishermen have, we've already dealt with the government restricting us in many ways, and then we have a company, whether it be an energy company or oil company or whatever, taking some of our ground away from us, which we've used all our lives. We can put up a pretty good fight.
The fishing industry is one of the most regulated industries in the world. It's a very tough job. It's the most dangerous job with logging that there is in the world. And it draws a certain kind of people. They're fiercely independent. And so when you propose to them, we're going to have a regional ocean plan, the first reaction is, that sounds a lot to me like government regulation, and they bristle.
Bullard's agency, NOAA Fisheries, is responsible for the nation's ocean resources and their habitat.
If you explain to fishermen, or anyone else for that matter, that it's not regulation, the regional ocean plans do not add a single layer of regulation. What they do is allow for federal agencies that might be regulating things like wind turbines to understand where you fish, so they know about you and your interests are represented early in the process.
Early cooperative research projects between wind energy developers and local fishermen smooth the waters for fisheries data to be included in the data portals.
Cooperative research, actually working with the industry, having the industry do the work. And it gives us a little more faith in the results of these surveys. I want to make sure that the right information goes in for the benefit of my fellow fishermen.
That aggregate information about where fishermen are and where fish are harvested, where they spawn, what seasons are they located here, what seasons are they located there, is important not just for managing and understanding stock size, but it's also important if we're going to figure out where can we locate things like wind turbines. That's important for fishermen to be able to protect their interests.
With the fishing industry's competing demands from wind farming, sand mining, cable laying, and aquaculture, the question has become how to fairly accommodate them all, not to mention how to prepare for the inevitable disruptions of a changing climate.
I have been lobstering for 49 years in Kittery Point, Maine. I started in 1965 with 10 traps. We go out every day lobstering. We haul between 250 and 300 traps. 'Cause 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 temperature increase, which is going to be shifting a lot of the lobsters down east towards the Canadian corner of the state. You remember what happened in Long Island Sound, in Boston, in Rhode Island? The lobsters have just been moving and moving and moving and moving, coming around the Cape. And we may be seeing those lobsters here now, on their way up to the Bay of Fundy area. The impact of no lobsters in the state of Maine, almost $1 billion. A lot of people. You've got the bait dealers, you've got the wholesalers, you've got the retailers, the restaurants, the summer tourism. It's quite involved.
Climate change is a major issue right now in the Mid-Atlantic and the New England area. We're seeing changes in water temperature in this region that are greater than any other place really in the world. And as the ocean conditions change, we're going to see species, fish species, aquatic resources that we manage moving as well. And so it's really a critical element to making sure that our commercial and recreational fisheries are maintained while there are these shifts in the populations for which we manage, and all of these other human uses of the ocean, develop, so that as other agencies and other decision makers are thinking about and considering managing parts of the ocean, that they'll have these critical data layers that show where the habitats are, which are vital to fish production, so that we can do our jobs as fisheries managers.
These data give managers a new tool, allow them to know exactly who they need to be talking with when they're making management decisions about a particular place in the ocean. So for example, if we zoom into an area here around Hudson, we can see the different levels of intensity of fishing. Areas that are really important are shown in these darker colors, and areas that are still important but not fished as often are shown in the shades of green. The neat thing about this layer is, if you're contemplating a project in this particular area, for example, or you just want to know more about it, you can click on the map and you can see where the boats are from, which communities depend on this area for their fishing. And in this case, it's Montauk, New London, Connecticut, Point Judith, Rhode Island, and Shinnecock, New York. All of these communities depend on these plays. So decisions around the Mid-Atlantic or in New England need to consider the needs of the whole coast.
Large-scale developments like sand mining, wind energy, and commercial aquaculture are among the industries now expanding into the ocean realm.
The U.S. is way behind the world in aquaculture. And if you look at the fishery statistics in the World Report, and you'll see that the wild fisheries has been flatlined for years, and the increase in fish production is all aquaculture, but not in the U.S. We're way behind. Just mussel aquaculture between us and Canada just shows that point. 90% of the mussels that you get here are Canadian mussels.
Maine sees aquaculture as a means of bolstering struggling economies by providing fishermen a new option. But those options are limited in nearshore waters.
In this area especially, the coastal areas are just too crowded to have a big enough area to set up to do a commercial scale shellfish aquaculture. And there's just too many other interactions with fishing and boating and recreation that there's just too many conflicts. Coastal waters within a state, 3 miles from the shoreline out, and then once you're past 3 miles, you're in federal waters. Here's our mussel farm site. Our site is actually 6.5, 7 nautical miles off of Cape Ann, Massachusetts. There are conflicts in federal waters, but there's a lot more ocean. So it's a lot easier to pick a spot that minimizes conflicts. And that's certainly what you have to do when you go to a site, especially a commercial-sized aquaculture site.
Salem State University's offshore mussel farm is the first shellfish farm established in federal waters off the Atlantic coast.
With depressed fishing economics going on in the Northeast, this is a new avenue of revenue for fishermen that are losing their revenue sources. So they could either do this full-time or supplement what they're doing now by setting up or working within a mussel farm. And the other technology development off of this is this concept of growing shellfish on a long line. You can start with mussels, but you can grow any kind of bivalve off of this, and also kelp. So you can do seaweed aquaculture as well.
Among the largest emerging industries in need of ocean real estate is offshore wind energy. The country's first wind farm recently went online off the coast of Rhode Island.
There's potential for thousands and thousands of megawatts of offshore wind in the United States. The industry is really in its infancy and it's going fast with the installation of the Block Island Wind Farm, which is America's first offshore wind project.
We're here today to celebrate the beginning of a world-class renewable energy project. The Block Island Wind Farm will be the first offshore wind farm in the U.S. There are 70 farms in Northern Europe. There are thousands of turbines working today, and there are 60,000 people working in that industry in Northern Europe today. The only people working in that industry in the U.S. are standing behind me right now.
The energy that runs America is increasingly coming by way of the sea, with turbines harnessing the power of wind and wave and tide, and pipelines and cables channeling oil, gas, and electricity. The sea is a critical source and conduit of our nation's fuel.
At the state level, there are more and more mandates that are coming in that require offshore wind. New York has set a 50% clean energy target, which we think would translate into about 12,000 megawatts of wind energy. New Jersey has set a goal of 1,100 megawatts of offshore wind, and Maryland has a 250 megawatt mandate. Recently, Massachusetts passed a mandate for 1,600 megawatts of offshore wind, which is the most aggressive goal that has been set in the United States so far. If we think ahead into the future, we see more and more use of the ocean by many different industries. So the data portal is very useful in citing a wind project. BOEM sets an area within which wind can be located. The data that is in the data portal is then used to define the specific areas where wind turbines and associated infrastructure should be placed. It's very valuable and it provides data that has been peer-reviewed and is accepted by the scientific community, so it's very valuable in the siting of projects.
What is a beach without sand? Or a sandy beach without castles? The ocean gives and takes its sand, its currents delivering new sands from the depths, its storms and high tides hauling them back into the sea.
There's been an increased interest and use of offshore sand. Not only increase in the number of leases and agreements, but the increase in the size of the projects, the amount of sand that we've issued.
Ridenour's chief concern is sand, now under increasing demand for coastal protection, restoration, and resilience planning. With more frequent storms and rising seas, that tug of war between beach and sea is more often going to the sea.
Historically, we've dealt with projects on a project-by-project basis, but with the increasing interest and demand for offshore sand resources, it becomes imperative that we look at those resources on a regional scale and in a regional context, because these resources are finite.
The rescue of our eroding beaches and dunes, nature's seawalls against storm and flood, has become a growing industry whose currency is sand.
We have issued leases and agreements for areas multiple times. For example, off Virginia and Florida, the same resource area has been used 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So there's implications with regards to diminishing resources in those particular keeps me up at night is really to understand where the resources are offshore, to get a good inventory, what we call a national sand inventory.
This is a photograph of Wallops Island, Virginia, taken in 2007. And when this seawall was constructed back in the early 1990s, the shoreline was out here, several hundred feet out from the seawall. NASA had valuable assets, launch pads, other facilities located on this barrier island that they needed to protect from storm damage. 3 million cubic yards of offshore sand was used to construct a beach along here. This is a photo of Wallops Island post shoreline restoration. So you see the seawall here, and the shoreline was constructed several hundred feet out using offshore sand resources, 3 million cubic yards. That's kept all these valuable assets on the beach. So we have $1 billion in assets that are being protected using offshore sand resources.
And even furthermore, it's important from a habitat standpoint, because you look at the beach itself is important habitat to a number of species, shorebirds, sea turtle, but also behind barrier islands there's salt marshes, wetlands that are important nursery grounds for fisheries, important habitat for a variety of bird species. So those important habitats are protected by maintaining barrier islands with material from offshore resource areas. So more and more state and local communities are looking to federal waters for material for their projects.
Ocean planning means working together to create new solutions that haven't been thought of before. Thinking outside the box and planning ahead for a healthy, safe, sustainable future. Now more than ever, there's a role for everyone to play who cares about the ocean.
To those of us that have grown up and work around the ocean and basically spent most of our lives talking about conservation of the ocean, it's a huge step forward and a really, really important thing that we see developing and want to see happen. It's all about sustaining healthy oceans, but also sustainable use of that ocean, because we all use it, we all depend on it for maritime transportation, for military security, and food, and resources, and recreation, and things like that. So we know that we need to sustain that. And without that context, without being able to put the decision that you're making into the context of all that data, you're really sort of just guessing. And we don't want to guess about something as important as the health of the ocean. Again, coming from an aquarium, we realize that the ocean is critical to a sustainable planet. If we aren't able to protect the ocean and use the ocean wisely, it doesn't bode well for us in the future.
Sometimes it is a little overwhelming to think that we have to change the way we live so much so we can keep our world up and going. But I think it's really great to think that we can save what we have now, and then we won't have to move to a different planet or something like that.
For more information, visit oceanfrontiers.org.
So thank you all for watching that movie and for doing your part to OPAC in your personal life so you don't have to move to another planet. I did want to see if the producer of this movie, Karen, is on the line.
Okay.
Yep. Come back, put a microphone. Yeah, so she's available to answer any questions or hear comments from the group. If anyone has anything they'd like to ask. It was a beautifully produced movie. Thank you for doing that. David has one.
Hi, Karen, David L. Just thank you for providing the shortened version of the film. I think we did make sure the links to the longer version that I saw in Yahats are available to members as well, but I think what you put together was a good overview of what the longer version was.
Thank you. Yeah, we have the films available online and DVDs, and through our website you can fill out a form and get all of that information from us. We screened the film country since it was released in February, and just really positive responses. I think people come away with a much better understanding of what the ocean planning involves, just how complex our uses of our oceans have become, and I guess the light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of people is seeing the collaboration that's taking place in many places really for the first time amongst all those different players that we have in the ocean realm.
Great.
Next week,
go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, next week we're screening at NOAA in Silver Spring. That NOAA Fisheries is hosting a screening, and we're doing a Hill briefing next week as well in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol, where two of the people in the film, the guy from the Coast Guard and the Navy, will be speaking about the national security implications of ocean planning and how the plans help them do their job.
Great, thank you. And then also to wrap up this agenda, I think Patty Snow wants to say a few words.
Thank you, Karen, for that. That's a great update on what's going on in the Northeast. So we wanted to give a little bit of update on what's going on in the West Coast. I know Karen mentioned that there's going to be a meeting of the West Coast Regional Planning Body in Long Beach in December.
California.
So to remind folks, the last two have actually been in Portland. It's easier for California to get here and Washington to get to Oregon. So they've been here at this time. We're actually going down to Long Beach. And there's going to be a meeting on Queen Mary of all. So you all may see notices of that from your various organizations. I don't know. Wanted to give a little bit, and plus you've got several people here at OPAC that are involved with the regional planning body. One thing that's very different about the West Coast is I believe in the Northeast they may have one tribe. On the West Coast we have close to 150 federally recognized tribes, and so that of course took a while to figure out how is that going to work. How are we going to get all these different interests represented? And so Megan, who's here, is the tribal co-lead for the RPB on the West Coast, and I'm actually the state co-lead. One of the two Oregon representatives, Andy is my alternate, and Karen is Ed Bull's alternate, so you can see we've got quite a few people here who are involved with the process. Chris Wall also usually is involved in the phone calls from the NOAA perspective. So we have monthly calls, the regional planning body, and so that's, again, folks from the federal agencies that are engaged, the 3 states, and tribes that are interested. And not all of those 150 tribes are interested, but a fair number of them are. Of course, they have all different, it's been quite a learning process. For example, the Makah and Paiute in Washington, they have tribal rights that go out, one of them 40 miles offshore. It's much further than the state waters, and we've got 3 miles. And our tribes in Oregon don't have those same ocean treaty rights, but they certainly have lots of other interests. So on the West Coast, we've got one regional planning body for the whole West Coast. We've got the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, and I don't think that the Southeast is really actively organizing an RPB, nor is the Gulf. But we do have one on the West Coast, but as you can see, it's huge compared to the East Coast. So we're much newer, and we're thinking that on the West Coast it's going to be more sub-regional. Washington is already, they've been going ahead on having a sub-regional plan for their outer coast, not including Puget Sound. It'll be a complement to what they're doing within their state waters. So they're currently in California. Well, I think I've mentioned this before, that there's some interest from the number of the tribes in having a Northern California and Oregon sub-regional plan. And so we're going going to be meeting as part of the meeting in December. We're going to be sitting down and talking about that, what does that look like? And the tribes actually met now it's 2 months ago. They met in September in Coos Bay. I believe it was 4 tribes from Northern California and 4 of the Oregon coastal tribes met in Coos Bay to talk about their interests. So if you have any questions about that, you've got somebody to talk to here about that. So this will be the first, in December will be the first time that we'll actually be sitting down to talk about that. And I think they're going to be having a call, the states are going to be having a call about that very issue on Monday. I just wanted to say that we're anticipating that in the West Coast, similar to the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, that the regional plan, it wouldn't look like our territorial sea plan, for example. It would be much more high level. We do have an ocean portal, and Andy, who is, your staff is also the co-chair of that. So the state of Oregon is very heavily involved. He's the co-chair of the West Coast Ocean Data Portal. And of course, that's a very important piece. Probably the biggest question for this is funding. Right now, there's funding for the coordinator who OPAC members have seen several times. John Hansen is the coordinator of the West Coast Regional Planning Body. Right now, there's some I would say, remnant NOAA money that's paying for him, as well as some foundation money, and that will go through the spring. And so at this point, we don't know, we're not really quite sure what the funding is going to look like after that. So without, as you probably know, without a coordinator and somebody really kind of maintaining these phone calls and putting meetings together and that sort of thing, it's much harder to make progress. So, is there a question there from David?
So when John Hansen presented last year, he talked about the funding issue. We mentioned what the status was. So do you expect by the next OPAC meeting in spring, either John or someone in his office will be able to have more clarity on the extent of funding that they would have available, especially for his coordinator position?
I would certainly think so. I mean, right now, there's a Moore Foundation grant that's actually paying for half of his position and some funding for the Ocean Data Portal. And so, we should know by then whether there's going to be a new Moore Foundation grant. And Chris looks like she may have something to add to that too.
Well, and I would just add that the need for funding, for ongoing funding for the coordination of the regional planning body and the Ocean Data Portal were identified as high priorities for the West Coast Regional Planning Body and are topics on the agenda at some level for this meeting in December. But certainly, if any members or public here have recommendations of avenues to pursue, get in touch with Patty or myself or anyone else involved in the regional planning body, making sure that was a larger group. But yeah, those two were identified as the highest priorities for the group.
And Terry, and I'm getting the
Okay, I'll make
notice
this
from
quick.
our president, our chair here.
The funding for the planning body and the portal are critical for this, but the big money isn't coming. And that's the research money we need to do juvenile work on all the species. All the data you have is basically on grown fish, not on how they live or what is the necessary bottom to create the food for the juvenile fish. There's this whole other separate science that's really expensive that needs to be done if we're going to really make good management decisions.
And just one last comment, the Pacific Marine Fisheries Commission is represented on the council. So just so you know.
They have money problems, so this other issue is really expensive.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the update on the RPB and also for this opportunity to see this film. So moving on, we are.
Gina,
Yeah.
we kind of got shut off there quick on this marine debris. Can I make one comment here that is related to the previous subject? The Marine Debris Action Plan concerns me. It took me a little while to think about it. I'm wondering where state parks was. The county, we looked at a program for it and decided we didn't have jurisdiction and we didn't fit. Not trying to say that because the time frame was short, but for Ocean Policy Committee, it seems like we should be giving some direction to the state, to the governor's office and to the state agencies, because if you don't get this money from the federal government, the state taxpayers have to pick it up.
So the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department receives, can you talk in the microphone? As far
tax dollars go, our agency is funded almost entirely by lottery dollars, and as far as what we did for looking into how we could fund our actions listed in the Marine Debris Action Plan this go around, it was a short timeline, and like I said before, we did contact NOAA with some needs that we have to fund equipment, and they told us that they can't fund those types of projects, so we didn't have any short-term needs for, that we could come up with in that timeline for projects. Most of the items listed in the Marine Action Plan that list state parks as the lead are ongoing activities. They also don't fund ongoing work, so they wouldn't fund ongoing removal of marine debris by our beach rangers, for example. They only fund new projects, and they wouldn't fund equipment, so we didn't have a project. And we did reach out to Surfrider and Sol, and Surfrider, Sol, and somebody else. Charlie, who else did we talk to? Sol, Surfrider, and Parks, and nobody could come up with a project in the timeline. So Charlie and I are going to talk about how we can move forward for the next application process.
So I don't want to go into this depth at this time, but I think this is absolutely a place where OPAC could step in and give some clear guidance to how, to trying to make sure that we receive the money to the state of Oregon. That's all my point was, not to beat on anybody for not doing it, but at a local level, we really can't do it. It has to come from the agencies, and that requires the governor's direction.
Okay, thank you. I think any way we can get more resources to Oregon is always a good idea. So, moving on, we're gonna hear from Kristen Don, ODFW's Marine Reserve Program. As you all know, this is a regular update we receive at all of our meetings, and so welcome, Kristen.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Don. I am the Marine Reserves Program Leader at the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I'm here today to share with you some highlights from the Marine Reserves Program from this past year, including sharing some results from a pilot study that we recently had published in a scientific journal. But because not all of us are immersed in marine reserves as I am, some of you are newer to Oregon's marine reserves than others, I thought it would be helpful before we jump into program highlights to just do a reminder of the what, where, and why we have Oregon's marine reserves, and a little bit about the ODFW Marine Reserves Program. So just as a reminder, Oregon has 5 marine reserve sites that are located up and down the Oregon coast. Each of the sites has a marine reserve where there is no ocean development and no fishing allowed. Most of the sites also include one or more marine protected area adjacent to the reserve. So in the protected areas, there's still no ocean development, but some fishing is allowed in each of the protected areas. And here I just wanted to note that the harvest restrictions at each of the sites took effect at different sites. The Cape Falcon site, for instance, just went into effect last year. So here are the goals for Oregon's marine reserves. Goals can be different for marine reserves all over the world, but these are the goals that OPAC set for Oregon's marine reserve sites. So our marine reserves are to conserve marine habitats and biodiversity. The reserves are also to serve as scientific reference sites where we learn about marine reserve protections and the effects that they have, as well as learning more about Oregon's nearshore ocean environment to inform management. And then the sites are to avoid significant negative impacts to ocean users and coastal communities. ODFW is in charge of overseeing the management and scientific monitoring of these 5 sites. We also share management responsibilities with state parks and Department of State Lands, and Oregon State Police does enforcement of the marine reserve sites. And then we're very fortunate to be collaborating with many partners on ecological, economic, and social research and monitoring, as well as on outreach and community engagement at the marine reserve sites. So these are the key areas that are required for our program to implement. These are requirements set by the Oregon State Legislature and OPAC for marine reserves implementation. And it includes that there be a marine reserve program evaluation in the year 2023 and a report submitted to the legislature that year. So a little bit about the ODFW Marine Reserves Program. We have 6 full-time permanent staff. Each biennium, we also tend to host fellows, interns, and some temporary employees. We have 3 staff that are dedicated to overseeing ecological monitoring work at the research sites. We have 1 staff who oversees what we call human dimensions research. So that's studying how people and communities are affected by marine research implementation. And we have 1 staff who oversees outreach and community engagement. And then I'm responsible for the overall program administration and the higher level policy work of the program. As a state agency, we operate on biennium budgets, so 2-year budget cycles. Our budget each biennium is approximately $1.8 million. Those are state general funds, so those are taxpayer dollars. About half those funds go towards our 6 permanent staff, and then the other $0.7 million goes towards marine reserve implementation activities. So for instance, the circle on the far right, about $260,000 per biennium goes